Hey friends, thanks again for joining in to our YouTube channel and our YouTube conversation. This is a pastoral conversation about race and the gospel. And today I'm joined by my friend Tanisha Walton. Tanisha and I went to high school together back in the 80s, and we were just talking before I pushed record of how it's been 30 years since we were in high school. And it's just hard to believe. But Tanisha, thanks for joining me. It's great to see you again. Introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you're doing in ministry and where the Lord kind of has you serving right now.
Yes, hello. I'm
Hello.
so happy to be here with you. Yes, Pastor Jeff and I go a long ways back. We were just singing in choir, feels
Right?
like back in the 80s.
Wow.
And now look at us, getting old. And anyway, so I am Tanisha. I've spent a lot of time at Redwood Chapel. That's where our gym was, the carpet gym.
Yes.
To practice basketball.
No. The carpet was Fremont Christian. We're the rubber floor.
The rubber floor.
Yeah.
The rubber mat floor. I
How
had
can you forget?
so many raspberries on my knees from falling on that floor.
That's right.
I spent a lot of time at Redwood Chapel.
Oh my goodness.
But I'm Tanisha Walton. I have a couple of roles. I am a director of Young Life at Cal Berkeley. So I'm leading the college ministry there, which is so amazing. It's been a very weird semester for us, but it's a wonderful ministry there. And I'm also a campus pastor at the Way Christian Center in Berkeley, California.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's what.
And like me, you're a Bay Area kid. You're born and raised around here and been in the area a long time.
Yes, I have. Born and raised in Oakland, California. Went to school in good old San Lorenzo.
That's right. Tanisha, listen, I appreciate you joining me and just taking some time today to have a conversation with me. I reached out to you because I trust you, first of all, and I trust your perspective and your heart. But I also reached out to you because I just have found myself in the last 2 weeks on a learning process and wanting to be a student of the situation, of our society, of our culture. Recognizing that God's given me a platform to lead people, but I don't feel like I can lead well until I have learned what I need to learn. So I'm trying to ask questions of friends who have perspective that will hopefully help to open my eyes. And so I'm really grateful that you've taken time today just to connect with me. So I'll just start by asking you a little bit of your background. If you could just kind of, you mentioned you grew up in the Bay Area, but talk about kind of your journey and your experiences as a kid and kind of how the Lord directed you into ministry.
Yeah, so I grew up in Oakland. I came to know the Lord when I was just 7.
Wow.
My mom had we all attended church as a family. And my mom was like, "This is the day I'm going down." And I just followed her because I didn't know what else to do. I'll just go with you. And that's when they had the fellowship halls in the back, and they'd go and talk to you and share with you the 4 spiritual laws. And I remember at 7 really getting and understanding everything they said and was like, yes, I want Jesus in my life. And so I really feel like since the age of 7, that's when the Lord really captured my heart. I was in a wonderful church in Oakland, California. I grew up at Paradise Baptist Church. Wonderful church. Oh man, they poured into us, and
Amen.
I mean, I just had the best childhood at that church. I don't, a lot of people are like, I hated church growing up. I don't have that experience. Our church was so fun. The adults were so amazing. So from then, I went to Redwood Christian High School. I first was led there because I had never seen an opportunity to pray before class. I was like, what? They pray? I'm in. So I went to Redwood for 4 years and then graduated from there and went to Biola University to play basketball. I ran track. I had a wonderful experience there at Biola. It was a good time. Go Eagles.
Yes.
From there, I graduated and I went back to my home church in Oakland, and my pastor then was like, hey, know you graduated, but we have like a vacation Bible school coming up. We just need someone just a volunteer. And I'm a new college graduate. I'm like, you know what? I have resumes to put out. I don't have time for kids, like no interest in kids.
But you can't say no to pastor. So.
I can't say no to pastor. So I was like, hell, okay, fine, I'll do it. And that summer, we did a vacation Bible school, and that vacation Bible school turned into a full-on neighborhood youth revival. Like,
wow.
We had kids coming out of everywhere. We started a lunch program for them. It was just amazing. And from that day forward, I was ruined. I was ruined for anything else. But and my heart was really for young people and for kids. I tried to do a regular life. I tried to go, I'm gonna do it off. I'm gonna pursue my major. In my heart, I was ruined after that point for ministry. I knew that's exactly what I wanted.
What did you think your trajectory was gonna be? Where were you headed in your career?
So I majored in radio, television, and film. So I wanted to do work at a news station or work background in production and do all the fancy stuff. And that got shut down really quick.
Well, we're doing this wrong. You should be interviewing me.
Right.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the Lord got a hold of your heart, brought you into ministry, and that's kind of been the journey since then.
The journey.
Yeah.
I've worked in lots of schools. I helped found a charter school in Berkeley.
Wow.
Worked at a lot of continuation schools.
Yeah.
I was an athletic director for a long time. And at the same time, being a youth pastor in each one of those roles, I was also a youth pastor at my church. So always have this parallel thing with kids and youth and young adults. So I'm transitioning into a campus pastor at my church. But my heart is still with the college students, with my young people at church. So that's
awesome. Yeah. I love what you're doing at Cal Berkeley too. What a great place to do ministry. And there's just so many opportunities there, and I'm sure that Berkeley has its reputation, but there's such a heart of God there, even in the midst of the chaos. I know that you're there on the front line, seeing that and leading Bible studies and being a part of people's lives, and I'm thankful that you're there.
It's so great. Most, whenever I tell people I'm at Cal Berkeley, their first response is like, oh my, that must be so hard. It's a crazy place. Yeah. But man, those students, they are hungry for God. They really are searching, and they're wanting more than what's being offered to them, the competitive nature of the campus. These kids are looking and searching for God. So I'm so happy to be there, to be a part of what God's doing there. And this to develop a community where kids, even disinterested kids, could feel free, like a welcoming, free place just to come and hear about Jesus and have fun at the same time.
That's great.
Yeah.
Tanisha, I reached out to you because of the kind of current situation in our culture. Really, the tipping point for me was the George Floyd killing of a couple of weeks ago. But really, I think there's this kind of angst that's been building in me on the issue of race, on the issue of conflict in our society, on the issue of disparity between people groups. And when I saw that video of what had taken place in Minnesota, first of all, I couldn't watch the whole thing. I started to watch it, and I saw, I know where this is going, and I'm not ready for this.
Right.
And so I turned it off. And I went and I kind of got my head in a space and really felt like the Holy Spirit was saying, you know what, you need to see this because you need to be aware. You need to be able to speak to this at some level. Yep. So you need to watch it. And so I went back and just through tears, just wept, really wept. It brings emotion out in me even now, just thinking about it. Where were you, and how are you processing that just in your personal life before we talk about how you're leading other people through it? How are you doing?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I have a lot of so great friends and white allies who, you know, call me and reach out and they're like, okay, like for like now I'm angry, or now, you know, this is it. And I'm kind of like, y'all, this has been our experience for the last 400 years. So when we see these things, it's not a surprise. It's not like, where did this come from? This is as per usual our experience in America as a people. And the only difference right now is that it is being recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine all the countless number of lives that have been taken that have not been recorded and had to just go on word of mouth that was not believed? So for us in the Black community, and I let me preference this by just saying, these are my opinions. I can't speak for the whole Black America.
Not asking you to, just want to hear your heart.
These are my opinions.
Yeah.
But it's very triggering. It's very triggering. And I think most people are triggered. I mean, just think about if you are a soldier or anyone who goes off to war and you see horrible things, and when you come back home, you know, maybe a gunshot or something triggers you. We understand that person, like, oh yeah, they have PTSD, we should get them treatment, we should get them counseling. But just imagine a whole nation of people who see these things on a regular basis. This is a part of our history. Wow. Just blatant executions of innocent people, and it's very triggering. We just have to live with it. We have to continue living.
Yeah.
So it is very hard. It's very exhausting because we think that it's 2020, it's 2020. Surely we've made strides. Surely we have come a long way. And just to see it happening over and over again, and this is just one case.
Yes, of course.
There's many other cases that have been caught on camera of innocent people who are unarmed and trying to comply, and they still have their lives taken based on skin color.
I mean, you know, none of us were there, right? None of us know the story. None of us know the day that anybody had leading up to the situation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. None of that is justifiable.
Yeah.
None of that provides an answer for I'm choking for my life and I'm telling you that I can't breathe.
Right.
And you're not listening, and you're just continuing to apply the pressure of your power on my neck. Right. And it's just heart-wrenching. It was so heart-wrenching for me to see that, to understand that. The word trigger is helpful. Help me understand kind of what's the first emotion that triggers, and then maybe what are some of the subsequent ones that come after it when you see something like that.
Oh, it's to the point where it should not be normal for Black people for this to be our norm. Like, trauma shouldn't be your norm.
Yeah.
So we've seen this over and over again. So to us, it's now like, oh, what a surprise.
Right. It's not shock necessarily.
Yeah. Eric Garner was killed the exact same way. Yeah. Chokeholds aren't even legal in New York. And the officer applied a chokehold to him for something he allegedly did. He also said, I couldn't breathe. And there was just no humanity.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of people take offense at the Black Lives Matter. But, you know, and they're like, hey, but all lives matter. But yes, we are the only group of people who have to prove our existence, like that we are human and our lives matter. If our lives matter, even in this case where someone's begging for their lives, we wouldn't have to say that Black Lives Matter.
I was thinking about that because I think the first time I heard the term Black Lives Matter was after the Ferguson situation, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. And I had that same response. Well, of course, Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter, you know. And if we just say Black Lives Matter, then are we also saying that Black Lives matter more than other lives, or that? And that's not what we're saying.
No, not at all.
In fact, I was thinking about Luke chapter 15, where Jesus leaves the 99 to go after the one.
Yeah.
And in this sense, if in this analogy, you could say the one that he leaves to go after is the Black life. the one that is in trouble, the one that is in turmoil, the one that needs to be rescued. And so if we have the mind and the heart of Jesus, then we can say, yeah, Black Lives Matter. And that's what we need to say, because we need to go after the oppressed. We need to go after those that are hurting. We need to go after the vulnerable and bring them back into a place of safety. And so it's helpful for me to just kind of think through that from a biblical perspective and thinking about the life of Jesus and his call to go after the one.
Yeah. That is so on point. And even if you flip it, sometimes Jesus has to go after our white brothers and sisters
Amen.
too, who are not hearing that someone's life can be taken and criminalized just by their skin color.
Yeah.
Like your skin color automatically gives you a death sentence in many cases. And it's an epidemic. Like, we have such a long list of people who have been killed. And if that was any other race group, it would be like, oh, policy, we would stop everything. So that's why it's kind of sad that Black people have to advocate for themselves and say, like, hey, yes, we're not saying your life doesn't matter, but your life's not being taken at a high rate disproportionately than any other group. Yeah. Like, we are human.
So I want to talk about white privilege and that kind of stuff in just a moment. But, one of the things that I think that this whole scenario has awakened in my own thinking and in my own heart is this sense of the United States. I'll just say generally, there's a culture that has been perpetuated of privilege, and as a kid who grew up in a suburban white community, went to a predominantly white school, went to a predominantly white church. My undergrad was in Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, so I made it to Biola for a year, and then I came home and went to Chabot, and then I headed back out to Chicago. But so I had some of that urban context in my background and in my education. But what have you seen as kind of the systemic problems that maybe you've faced personally, and feel free to share any examples that you maybe have of, yeah, here's how I've seen this play out either in my own life or in my communities that I've served or worked with.
Yes, definitely. And I'm so grateful for this platform, and I'm hoping that the listeners will not tune out, but this is a great time just to hear. Yes. A lot of people, get like, oh, here comes the guilt trip, or here comes but this is all really said in love, because it's very important to understand the system of racism. Like, a lot of people are like, but I am not racist. And we're like, yes, you probably are not, but are you complicit in the things that you see? Do you see things and don't make a change? Because even the way this country is even set up, it was never set up for Black Americans. It was never, even from the jump, from the Constitution, we were labeled 3/5 of a human, and that was just for political purposes. So from the start, we weren't even seen as humans. So all of the rights and all the things that come along with the American dream and the Constitution really doesn't pertain to us.
We hold these truths that all are created equal except for them.
But at that time, each one of those founding fathers had slaves.
Right.
They weren't talking to us.
Right. No, that's my point.
Yeah. So
all of us are created equal, but not everybody.
Because they're not even human.
Yeah.
Wow. And so when we just start there, we start and we see, like, okay, from the beginning, the system is not even for us. Okay, and then I heard someone give such a good example of this, and I totally cannot take credit for this, but they talked about it as if you want to describe systemic racism, it's like playing Monopoly. We've all played Monopoly. It's a great game, but can you imagine if you were playing and you're playing a group of people and they were like, hey, we're going to go around the board. Remember, you can't even buy anything until you go around once. We're going to go around 3 times. We as a group are going to go around this board 3 times. You're not allowed to play until the 4th time. So can you imagine trying to play Monopoly
Mm.
after people have gone around the board? Everything's bought up. There's no more hotels. There's no more houses to buy. Maybe you could do Baltic and Mediterranean, the little cheap housing, but that's all you're. So when you look at systemic racism, it could be likened to that.
Yeah, well, that's good.
We've had the majority cultures had such a head start on us. They've bought up. They have generational wealth, and now we're trying to just be a part of the American dream.
Right.
But there were so many obstacles, so much segregation, so many banking policies, so many practices, so much segregation, so much terrorism from lynching, and it's just so much. So a lot of people, when they first hear the word white privilege, they're taken aback because they're like, well, I work hard for my things and nothing was handed to me. This is the American way. Like, you got to pull yourself up from bootstraps and you got to work hard. And I've worked hard for everything I've gotten. And that's really not what we're saying in white privilege. It's more like a class issue. Right. Like, you have privilege, it's like classism, and it allows you to move safely through the world. And it allows you to have opportunities that people of color don't. Doesn't mean that you're racist if you have white privilege. It just means that you have an advantage. That you had no hand in. It wasn't your fault. It's not bad for you to be white. No one's mad. Like, you should be proud of your heritage, but you should also know that there's a lot of privilege that comes with your heritage. Yeah. And it's okay to recognize that.
Yeah. And I don't think that, I'll just speak for me personally. Yeah. I don't think that I always recognized my white privilege until I started having intentional conversations with people who did not experience it.
Right.
And so when you see, my a privilege kind of growing up or experience or whatever background that I had, and I compare it with somebody who had a different experience, then all of a sudden it comes into focus, maybe in a way that it did not before. And it can be helpful just to see that for what it is, and to say it, and to say, you know what, it's not a good thing or a bad thing that I had that experience. What is good or bad is what I do with that experience and how I use that. So talk about that a little bit, and just what you see and what you experience in that realm.
It's so true. It's what you do with it. Most people never make it past the white privilege conversation because they just kind of cut it off by there. It's neither good nor bad. That's such a good way to put it. But it's what you do with it. With your privilege, will you share power? Will you share opportunities? This is even if we put this in context of the gospel. Jesus said, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Are you willing to be last sometimes? Are you willing to give up your position? Not that, most people are like, I'm not giving up my lifestyle, but not even that. Will you make room for other people? And it's very troubling to me, Pastor Jeff, and I'm just going to speak candidly, how many people can move through this world and have no idea of what another race is going through. I have so many of my white brothers and sisters that are like, I had no idea. And that really speaks to what gospel are we really carrying, that you can live your whole life and be oblivious to the sufferings of others. And lots of times we're not even believed. Like, we try to tell our story. They're like, yeah, you're not going, it's not that bad.
Yeah. So how do you counter that? Like, what would you say to, someone from my background, from a white background, or someone who says, I can't believe that it's really that bad? How would you encourage someone to best step into that world to see it? Obviously, conversation is a good place to start. But where do you go beyond conversation?
This is what I'm encouraging. I've had so many people who are been so great, and I could just really feel a shift in even the culture of our nation. So many people are like, okay, help me, I want to talk through this.
Yes.
And I'm so happy even for the conversation. I would say the first thing to do is just listen. Listen to someone's story without trying to give an answer, without a rebuttal. But what about, and what, could you just sit and listen and empathize with someone's story without questioning it, and just sit in the tension of that? That is such a good place to start. Just having a heart check. I also tell a lot of my friends, they come to me and like, teach me all things about racism. And I'm like, okay.
And you have 5 minutes, go.
Yeah, that's cool, but I am so encouraging people, if you really care, if this is an issue that you care, you have to put the work in.
Yeah.
Read a book, do research, study history.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you can be that blind to what's so apparent. Like, ask God to let me see with the eyes that you have. Because a lot of times when you're comfortable or you have, it's not even that you're trying to be, I'm not saying anyone's trying to be a bad person. You just don't know sometimes. And if you just don't know, that means you have isolated yourself in a bubble, in a world that is not real to a lot of your brothers and sisters in Christ. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really good. It's really helpful. I think that, one of the things that I tell my kids is, you got to listen to understand, not listen to respond. Ooh. Right. So I want to hear you to understand you, not just so that I have a response for whatever it is that you're saying. And I think that in this kind of a conversation, that is a really helpful perspective to have. I'm not interested in convincing you that you're wrong. I'm interested in learning what I can from you so that I can adjust my thinking, my ways, whatever my perspective, to better empathize with the hurt that you're experiencing, because that's gospel activity, right? So, greater love has no one than this, that a man would lay down his life for his friend, what did Jesus do but lay aside his own majesty, taking up our humanity, removing himself from a position of power to come to a place where there's a position of weakness, so that I can empathize with my brothers and sisters and ultimately lift them back to a place of hope.
It's
like that's the Bible. That's the Bible.
It's really very simple. Yeah. And that's what worries me, though, a lot of times with white evangelicals. It worries me, like, what gospel are we really preaching? We haven't had a very strong history in white churches of preaching a liberation gospel. It's the gospel was used, not by all, but people were very complacent for 400 years. Would go to church every Sunday, good Jesus believing people, but perhaps owned slaves, or believed in segregation, or Black people over here, or somehow people were really blind, which that's why I'm scared a lot of times when people just don't see, or don't, because I feel like that's the same spirit that was operating for 400 years, that you just don't see anything. So, but what does our Savior, just like you said, Pastor Jeff, is so on point. What was the mission of his whole plan down here when he was here? If we are really living the gospel, Jesus loved the margins. He loved the people of the margins, the ones who thought they were the insiders, the religious leaders, the ones who had the powers. He didn't want anything to do with. He was like, what are y'all? This is not what I came down to do. But instead, he got all the people who everyone threw out, all the Samaritan women, the woman with the issue of blood. I mean, we could just go on and on. He loved the oppressed.
Yes.
And so it speaks to our church, like, why don't we have the same heart when it comes to Black people in America?
It seems like he intentionally went to the margins for those purposes, to bring about restoration, to show dignity, to show value, to show that person, regardless of their disease or regardless of their ethnicity, has the image of God in them. They have value to me, therefore they should have value to us. And I think that message just resonates all through the gospel if you take the time to read it.
If you take it, so yeah, where did we lose it?
Yeah, and to the extent that the church, the white evangelical church, has lost it or has not said it or has ignored it or has been complicit in our silence, that's why I want to have this conversation. As I said, I want to know how to lead better going forward, and have a more robust view of what is really happening in different communities and how that's being experienced by my brothers and sisters of color who are feeling, is anybody listening? Is anybody aware? Does anybody care? Does anybody have a voice for us so that it's not just our voice? And that's just, anyway, I just really.
Yeah, I think that's so good, Pastor Jeff. And I believe there's only 12 to 15% Black people in this country. So
yeah, I think I read 14%.
14,
so you're right there.
So we literally we're not a people who have the majority of power or have the majority of having a voice.
Yeah.
But this is where we need to be, like, in the body of Christ. And it'd be so amazing. It's like, what can we do better? It'd be so great if our white brothers and sisters would just believe our experience.
Yeah.
Just believe, just listen to what we're saying and just believe what we're experiencing. We have no reason to make this up. Like, we would be so happy to mind our own business.
If this was not our story. Yeah.
Right. Like, what do we benefit from trying to tell y'all that we're getting killed at a high rate by police? Like, what does that do for us?
Right.
So if you have friends, just listen to them without questioning and without, it's good to have questions, but not just, are you listening to care or are you listening?
Yeah, not to be argumentative, not to tell you that you're wrong, but to hear it and just to try to sit in it and try to hear it and be a part of that conversation.
That means you have to care.
Yeah. So your heart has to be there first.
Most people, if we're going to be really honest, they don't care. It doesn't involve them. If it doesn't mess with my kids, if it doesn't mess with my money or my comfortability, then it's really not my problem. Yeah. And that's what I found a lot of in white America. It's not my problem. But if it messed with your kids or your money or your comfort, it would be your problem.
It'd become your problem.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So can we love like Jesus?
It's good. Boy, I've got a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions and places to go. So bear with me here just as I kind of formulate a thought. But, one of the things that you talk about white evangelicalism, not caring enough really about the gospel. And I think a lot of my friends who are pastors, a lot of people in my church would say, what do you mean you don't care about the gospel? The gospel is the most important thing. But to the extent that we have made the gospel about our comfort, or the gospel about politics, because it does come in, and politics become things that we put points of emphasis on. We put points of emphasis on the economy and on stability and on our job markets and our IRAs and those kind of things. You don't find any of that in the Bible. You don't find any of that in really in the gospel. The gospel is not about me having a comfortable future here on earth. The gospel is about me promoting the best future for the most numbers of people in the new heavens and the new earth. Right. So let's talk for just a couple minutes about how racism can work in both directions, to the extent that the Church of Jesus Christ is almost rendered I'll say impotent or powerless, in the sense that we continue to be segregated even in our worship.
Yes.
And it's understandable from a place of I'm gonna tribe together with people who I'm safe with, right? True. So that's understandable, and I get that, but I want to push myself to think, how do we move the church forward to be a place where every tribe, tongue, nation, and language is embraced. Everybody's story is heard, and all of us ultimately are in submission to Jesus as our King and as the one who we are pursuing together. Do you have any thoughts just on that?
Yeah,
The church
I
in general?
do. I do. And a lot of times in the past, in our attempt to have multicultural churches, or we want to be diverse, so many times that ends up being just a very white culture. So
Yeah.
people kind of use the things like, hey, we are colorblind. I don't even see color. That was like a big thing, coming up, and just really trying to get people of color to be in our spaces, but it's really not a space for them. You just kind of want to merge them into white culture. And our God is so creative and innovative, and it is God's design to have diversity. God's not colorblind. He made us all different shades and hues on purpose to show off his creativeness, his creative genius. Yeah. So we are all the idea of God. So if we're trying to be colorblind, we're kind of being anti-God's idea. That's not but the idea is to celebrate each culture. So now we get into a problem of culture. We have culture classes, like the way different cultures worship are super different. Some are quiet, some are very loud, some are very, so a lot of times it's hard to integrate all that into one big happy family. So what it usually ends up being, all of y'all people of color, y'all just come up and be a part of what we do. And if we do have people of color in our church, they're usually not in positions of power. They're usually the singers, the musicians, maybe the kids worker, but they're usually, if you look on most church boards, and this is no shade, I'm just speaking truth. Sure. If you look at most of people's boards, or you look at their senior leaders, or you look at that's not where people of color usually are. So in an effort, if we are trying to be diverse, we have to celebrate each person's diverseness, not just like, we're going to have the potluck of everyone's heritage, deeper than that. Yeah. And this is where white privilege is, letting the last lead, putting people who don't have a lot of power in power. Now, this is where a lot of people, this is where the rubber meets the road, because this sounds like a great idea in theory. Right. You have to ask people, are you willing to be led by a Black person? Yeah. And that's where most people have to really do some introspectiveness and say, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. What is your thoughts about that? Do you feel, and this is where our work of dismantling white supremacy, when usually I say that, people are taken aback, like, no, I'm not a white supremacist. Yeah. So not the alt-right people, not saying that, but just the idea that whiteness is supreme. Yeah. Or that white is the right way, it's not right unless it's done this way, and we only see things through a lens. So if we're going to dismantle that, we have to start thinking kingdom. It's not we think American culture, or we think white culture, and if it's not done a certain way, then it's not right. And so we have to dismantle those things, put people of color in leadership positions, and allow people to learn from them and grow from them. And people have to be willing to be led by them.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Hey, I'm going to ask you a question, and respond however you feel is appropriate. But does racism work backwards? Yeah. In other words, does the Black community demonstrate racism towards white brothers and sisters, either from a place of cautiousness or a place of mistrust? Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to get 10 families from my church, and we're just going to go submit ourselves to being parishioners in a Black church, and we're just gonna do that, and we're gonna trust the leadership and be a part of that. Would there be like, what are these folks doing? And can we trust what's going on here? Does that work backwards too?
So there is a difference. A lot of people they throw away, hey, that's reverse racism, but in correct terms, a person of color who's not the dominant race cannot technically be racist, because racism has to do with power.
Okay.
And so if you have a power over a group, or you have the majority, that's why you have power. So you can be racist for someone because you're taking away their power.
Okay.
A Black person could be prejudiced, it could be bigoted,
yep,
or could be stereotypical,
yep,
but we don't really possess power. I can't hurt you as a person. Like, hey, I don't like you, and
yeah,
I can't really hurt you financially,
right.
or I don't have any power to take from you.
Interesting.
But I can be. So you would find, people will be so surprised to find, if they ever go into a Black community or a Black church, but Black people are like the most welcoming, affirming,
yeah,
loving. You come in, they're like, oh, it's so good to have you. Come on in. Which is so different than what we experience when we go into places. We get stares and looks, and what are they doing here? You stay in your place. Or I didn't know you guys were on this side of the track. So I think it should be, if you're going to submit, definitely you should be in relationship with someone. Just like, hey, I'm showing up, we're in. So get to know people, get to know, be in relationship with people. But of course, everyone has a bias. Everyone has an angle or worldview that they're seeing things from. But this is where I think the church has to be a difference. Because we are truly brothers and sisters in the body of Christ. It erases all those lines. We just have to learn how to live together culturally.
That's good, man. That's so good, so helpful. How do you think we do that? What's a practical step, or 2 or 3 things? You talked about listening. You talked about being engaged in the process and reading books and that kind of stuff. Do you have a resource or something that you would just say, here's maybe a starting point if you want to really lean into this conversation?
Oh yeah. I have a couple of things. The first is definitely the Word of God, which sounds a little canned, but definitely in 1 Corinthians 12, when it's just talking about the bodies, like how can we come together as truly as the body of Christ. And I'll just read just a couple. I won't take a lot of time.
No, good.
But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that's lacked, and that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. I think that's such a great starting point. If we're going to be the body of Christ, like truly living out what this is, we can't be like, hey, that's a Black issue. I don't know any Black people. No, as the body of Christ, if one's hurting, we're all hurting.
That's right.
That's why you're hearing a lot of people saying, hey, if Black lives don't matter, then no one's lives are. Like, what are we doing here?
Right.
Like, when do we as a body of Christ say, if we're all not free, then I'm not free. I won't be free. Yeah. And I feel like it's until we really embrace that type of heart towards one another, and I don't know how we could go forward unless a group of people. And to me, Pastor Jeff, I think that's what revival is going to look like in this day. It's going to be people saying, we've been neutral about this too long. It's okay to be, some people are like, I was not there. I did not own slaves. This is not my problem. Yeah, but you're benefiting from the system that has not been set up for us. But it's easy for you to get a loan. You probably got a house. People don't stare at you when you go into different. I'm sure you didn't have to have any talks with your kids about how to stay safe, how to deal with police officers. It's a difference.
Yes.
So
and all of that is your experience. All of that is what you grew up with and what you've done with your own kids, I'm sure, and how you prepared them for life. And and so how do you, as you pastor people and kind of walk with them, how do you keep people from getting just so discouraged that they just say, forget it? if this is Christian America, I want no part of Christ.
I'm trying to tell you, there's already a really big distrust, just because of the nature of our history, the way that the gospel was used.
To keep people down.
To keep people down. They had I was reading about, I mean, I'm sure this is all, anyone can find this in history. They had slave Bibles. So the slave Bible, first of all, slaves weren't even allowed to learn how to read. This is just general knowledge. Because if they read, they could get some glimmer of hope for
education is power. Yep.
Oh, man. So, but when they didn't know how to read, they would take out all liberation scriptures. All of Exodus would be removed. Any scriptures like it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. They had their own, they took time to make a slave Bible. So coming from that kind of history with Christianity, a lot of people are like, I mean, are we still following this? But I do love, what I love about our ancestors is that they really met the real Jesus. Even through all, it's the only way we could have lived through all that terror, all the injustice. It's the only way. That's the only way I'm still standing. I look and wonder, like, how am I even alive? How did my line even make it through all of that craziness? So it's so hard to pastor people through this time, though, Pastor Jess, because the cry is, how long, oh Lord?
Yes, amen.
Especially when we feel like we've made advances, we made strides, we have changed the laws, we have video phones. Like, surely, if it's caught on camera, it's an easy conviction. I think there's only been one conviction so far in all of those lists of Black people who have died innocently. And can I just say, on a side note, a lot of people, just a quick side note, and I'll get, in our Western culture, we kind of tend to think like, I call them like the Job friends kind of reasoning. Surely you did something to deserve this. So we see all these people who have died, and I hear a lot of people saying, well, if they would just listen, or if they wouldn't do illegal things, or if they would just just do what the officer says, they wouldn't break the law, they wouldn't be in trouble. It kind of sounds like Job's friends, like, surely, Job, you did something to deserve this. But
you brought this on yourself somehow.
And really, Black people are the only ones who have to give a reason for why they got murdered. Like, it's never just enough that a human being was killed. Like, surely they did something. And all we are asking, even if someone is dead wrong, even if they robbed, they took something, they got caught, can we please allow the process of the law to work for them? Can we just be arrested without being tried and convicted and executed on the street? On the street. That's all we're asking. Some people are wrong. People do wrong. And not just Black people. There's every race.
Everybody, sure.
Every race has, what we call bad apples. So this is pastoring people through these thought process. It gets really hard. You might see a lot of posts right now that's like, Black people are like, we are exhausted. I mean, how much more are we supposed to take? And how much, there's been a lot of criticisms with the riots and the looting, but, what else is there? Like, a lot of if there was no outcry, there would not even be arrest. Like, what are people supposed to do with 400 years of hurt? You're just supposed to sit down peacefully somewhere and watch your own people get executed on the street. So there's a lot of angst. It doesn't make a lot of the destruction of property or the looting right, but more people are concerned about burning buildings and merchandise taking than a human life being lost.
That's really good. Tanisha, before I'd let you go, just give me a word. As a white pastor, as a white man, what do I need to hear from you? How can I be a part of the solution and have a voice that matters in this conversation? Just give me a word.
Yes, Pastor Jeff, you're already on the right track. For even to have this conversation and even just to care is huge. Is huge in this season. And I would say to you and to everyone who's listening, be a missionary to your own people. There's so, white evangelicals are famous for sending missionaries around the world. They will everybody's going to hear the gospel. But in this season, it's time for, if you become aware of things, if you become aware of your privilege, or if you become aware of things and you're kind of coming out of like, oh, things are happening, be a missionary to your own people. A lot of white people will not listen to us. We sound like Charlie Brown's a teacher at this point. They're kind of like, we sound like what do y'all want now? But if you can go into the places of where you have influence, the platform that you have, your family, your grandma, your auntie, whenever those conversations are going on at the dinner table, or you hear something at the pool party and people are making crass jokes or, being flippant about Black lives, this is your time to be a missionary to your own people and to be an ally. I would also say keep focusing on what Jesus focused on. He focused on the margins. That was his whole ministry. He only had rebukes for those who thought they had power and that they were on the inside. He would say, stop being an obstacle to these people. Like, I'm trying to get them my love. Don't be an obstacle. So focus on the margins. And lastly, I would say, even the Good Samaritan story we hear, and we're always like so enamored with the Samaritan. We love him, but we also need to take a word of warning from the two people who passed him by.
Yes.
Right? And that's kind of how I feel like white evangelicals, white America have been the ones who have passed by. Yeah. Not my problem. Not, hey, I can't get involved in that. Let us not
don't want to get my hands dirty.
Don't get my hands dirty. I'm on my way to church. It's not my thing. One was a priest, one was these are people who knew God and yet had no time or to be compassionate to someone who was hurting. Let's not be those two people. Let's be the ones who will go after the hurting, to give up power, to share power, to listen, just to be a friend. And a lot of people, they hear that, they get excited, like, I need a Black friend now. Like, let it be genuine. Don't just grab the person down the street. Like, really come in with a genuine heart. It's really humble yourself. That's really hard for people who are used to being in the lead. It's really hard for people who are used to being first. It's hard to humble yourself sometimes and say, like, hey, I won't go first. You can go first. This is for you. So, boy, when that happens, we're talking revival.
Amen. What a beautiful day that'll be, too.
Yes, sir.
Tanisha, you are a light in this situation and in this conversation, and you've been an encouragement to me just in this last hour. Thank you so much for taking time. Okay. Thanks for helping me to see things through your eyes, and for giving voice to a people who are hurting. And I just want you to know that I care, and if there's anything that I can do for you to help the conversation, if there's a place where you need me, please reach out. Sure. I want to learn, and I want to be there, and I don't want this to continue. This is not the way that it's supposed to be, and it grieves my heart. I know, more importantly, it grieves the heart of God. And so, thank you. Thanks for making time, and really appreciate it.
I also have a list of resources. I will send them to you, and you can make them available to you.
Yeah, I'll drop them down in the show notes underneath, and if we put this up on YouTube and people can go find them, I can link them to Amazon or whatever, so that'd be great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tanisha. You're awesome. I appreciate you. Take care.
Take care.